Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's video for the Orville. Now, for this video, I'm not going to do like I normally do a full-on review. Typically with shows like this, I'll like write out a huge long script. I'll watch the whole season, each episode in detail, and then go into detail about each episode and write this huge script. It'll take me a couple of days. And the thing is I didn't really have time to do that for the Orville. Maybe I'll do this, something like this for season 1 of the Orville, like next year, right before season 2 comes out, if I have time. I was just too busy with too many stuff. So like every time, because I got so many requests to review the Orville, and every time I'm like, I should review the Orville because I have a lot to say about it. But every time I try to find a place on my schedule, and my patrons will know because they see my schedule and all the videos I have planned months in advance, I can never find a spot to it, and it ends up being pushed back to like March or April. And I didn't want to wait till like March or April. So I was planning on doing this video just off the top of my head, spewing some thoughts when I had free time. And this is the first time since the show ended in December that I actually had free time, because I've actually been behind on a lot of the videos, and I finally caught up the videos. So I had a very busy schedule, so now it's time to talk about the Orville. So here's the thing: when a lot of people request the show, and I had no intention of reviewing this show, let alone watching it. Like, I saw the commercials for it, and I was like, oh, this looks like a quaint little Star Trek parody. I'm not the biggest fan of Seth MacFarlane, so you gotta keep that in mind. But I was like, oh, this looks like a quaint little parody. Maybe I'll watch it. And then they got so many people were like, review the Orville, review the Orville, review the Orville, and I'm like, I felt like I was being peer pressured into watching the show. But I mean, I might have watched the show on my own volition anyway, but I just felt like with so many people asking for it, it seems like I was sort of being pressured into it. But eventually, once the season ended, I did binge watch the whole thing in one go, as I said, and I just hadn't had a chance to talk about it before now. But the other thing is, whenever I get a lot of people asking me to review something that I haven't reviewed, typically there's a reason why I haven't reviewed it, and as I said, it's because I'm perhaps not as big on the show as all these people who want me to review it is. Therefore, if I did actually review it, they wouldn't be happy with what I have to say about it, because typically the people who ask are fans of the show, so they're fans, they want to hear my opinion, but because they're fans, they might not like what I have to say. Now, to be clear, I like the Orville. I love this show. I think it's great. It's funny. It's a great Star Trek parody show. It was actually much better than I thought it would be. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to spend a lot of time in this video talking about that. Maybe I'll get to that at the end. Unfortunately, I'll have to talk about the fan reaction to this show and the comparisons to Discovery. And here's the thing. It really irritates me that so many people feel the need to compare this to Discovery. So I flat out will not do that. I am not going to say ever which show I like better, because I think it couldn't be more irrelevant. My YouTube feed and all these feeds were flooded with all these videos like Orville versus Discovery, Orville versus Discovery, Orville versus Discovery, and pretty much every single solitary one of those videos was saying the exact same thing. Orville is Star Trek. Orville is the Star Trek show we've been waiting for. Discovery is this piece of shit that's not Star Trek. It's not Star Trek at all. This is gloomy. It doesn't hold true to the Star Trek feel. And Orville is the show that we like. And I'm sorry, but I very strongly disagree with that. As I said, I like the Orville, and that's because it is a parody comedy show. If I were to think of it as a serious drama Star Trek show, if it wasn't called the Orville, if it was called Star Trek Orville, there wasn't like the whatever the hell they call it. I can't even remember what they call it. They don't call it the Federation. They have this other word. They call it the Federation. They call it Starfleet. This guy, were Klingons, and this was like another android, like Data. If this was full on Star Trek, but you had the same, like all the characters were the same, and all the stories were the same, then I would think the show sucks. I'm sorry. that is the truth. But it's not Star Trek. It is not a drama. It is a parody comedy, and has a parody comedy. It's a damn good one. I love it. Now, some people may think I'm splitting hairs, but let me put it to you this way. One of my favorite movies of all time is Ace Ventura. And I'll start with Ace Ventura: When Nature Calls, the sequel, because a lot of people don't like that movie. I love that. I think that's one of the funniest movies. I even like that better than the first one, honestly. And so that is one of my I put it in my top 50 favorite movies of all time because I love it. But I love it as a comedy. If you were to say that's a serious drama and is not meant to be funny, and you should take it as a drama, then I would say it sucks. I would say it's silly. It has this goofy guy going, alrighty then. That's not realistic. That's dumb. But because it's a comedy, you have different suspension of disbelief. You view things in different minds. So some people may think genres don't matter. And I think when you get into the more like splitting hair type genre, like people were saying Star Wars isn't science fiction, which is the biggest load of bullshit I've ever heard. Of course it's science fiction. It's fantasy science fiction. They can't say, oh, it's fantasy and not science fiction. No, it's both. So when you get into those splitting hairs, genres don't really matter. It's just how people define it. But when you get into more broad strokes, like more general genres, like you view dramas differently than you view horrors, than you view comedies, then you view suspense. You come in with different expectations, and that's why sometimes some movies are ruined by false advertising, because sometimes films are marketed the wrong way, where you have a trailer where it's telling you this is happy comedy, but it ends up being a heavy drama. So you go and you end up not liking the film because you weren't in the mindset to watch a serious drama. So I think genre things do matter, and because I know that the Orville is a comedy parody, I'm able to take a lot of these things with a grain of salt and be like, oh, it services the comedy. It services the commentary on Star Trek. And for commentary on Star Trek, I think it's damn good. And I would even put it above Galaxy Quest as really, like, Seth MacFarlane really understands Star Trek. But that doesn't mean it's a Star Trek show. It is still a parody. And if I take away, just like Ace Ventura, if I take away that crutch, that genre, and say this isn't a parody, it's serious, then I would have a lot of issues with the show, and I would frankly think it sucks. And I think I heard somewhere that Seth MacFarlane originally pitched it as a Star Trek show, and I think turning him down was the smartest move ever. Because for one thing, okay, let me get into all the issues I would have because let me be clear, I don't have these issues with the show because it is a parody comedy. But if you were to say this was a Star Trek drama, let me get into all the issues. First and foremost, it's just a recycle of all the Star Trek plots. Like Red Letter Media pointed out that this is basically just recycling the Star Trek plots, but with dick jokes. And that's true. It is actually true. And honestly, it has more of a feel. It doesn't feel like Star Trek to me. It feels more like Stargate SG-1, which I know SG-1 fans disagree with me, but I'm sorry. It's truth. That borrows a lot from Star Trek Next Generation, at Deep Space Nine, Voyager as well. And it seems like it's sort of, to me, kind of like a lesser version of it, and that's what the Orville feels like. It feels kind of like a lesser sort of version and that's the other thing. It's basically just the same thing as Next Generation. It's episodic. It's got the bright lighting, and it's, they're joking around and just going on an adventure from space to space. And I do not want Star Trek to be like that. If the next Star Trek show they did was like this, exactly like this, then I would fail. I'm sorry, that's the truth. A lot of Star Trek fans who are unhappy with the dark tone and different direction Discovery is going in, they latch on to this. But the honest truth is, if this was the Star Trek show, not Discovery, then it would fail. And Enterprise is the biggest evidence of that. Why do you think Enterprise failed? Because it was just copying the original series. It was just being like the original series, and it wasn't offering anything new or exciting. It was just retreading everything we've seen before. And Voyager was doing the same thing with Next Generation. That's why Star Trek died. That's why people had franchise fatigue, and that's why Star Trek died, because they weren't offering anything new. It was just doing the same thing over and over again. Now, the last 2 seasons of Enterprise actually were new and inventive, and people did like it, but by that time, the damage was already done, because the last 2 seasons of Enterprise actually did get better ratings and people were getting more interested, but at that point it was more of a political thing and the network was just done with Star Trek. But it was basically those first 2 seasons of Enterprise and the last 3 seasons of Voyager was just repeating the same thing over and over and over again. And if you slapped on the name Star Trek to this show, it would be the exact same way and would bomb. I'm sorry, but that's the truth. Now, some people, fans of the show, might be like, well, Mark, you're wrong, because the audience score love the Orville and they hate Discovery, and everyone thinks Orville's better and people love the Orville. That's because it isn't a drama. It is a comedy parody, just as I said. And that's what is attracting people. And I'm one of them. I love the Orville. I think it's great because I can look at it through the lens of a comedy parody. And so all these shows, all these videos, YouTube videos and stuff I watch are like, Orville versus Discovery. And this one video I watched is like, so Discovery and Orville are fighting to see who will be named the Star Trek show. No, they're not. One's a Star Trek parody show and the other is a Star Trek show. I'm sorry if you don't like that. I'm sorry if you prefer one over the other, but that's facts. That's just the way that it is. I'm sorry. No, it doesn't matter if Discovery's canceled and Orville comes on to be successful. It doesn't matter if the fan score for Orville is like way better than Discovery. Doesn't change the fact that Orville is not Star Trek and Discovery is. Now, as I said before, I'm not going to say which one I prefer better. But I will say, you can judge by my channel which show I'm more interested in, because which one do I review it week to week and which one have I taken like months to get to. But that has more to do, that doesn't necessarily mean I like Discovery better. It just has more to do with I'm more interested in dramas, because if you know my channel, I hardly ever cover comedies. Comedies just isn't my thing, and as I said, the Orville is a comedy. That doesn't mean I don't like it, it just means I look at it in a different way. I love Rick and Morty, and I never cover that on my channel, because I'm just more interested in covering drama shows on my channel than I am Orville. So, comedy. So it doesn't mean I like Discovery better, but on the other hand, I will say, with the Orville, I think this is, for what it is, and it's a comedy parody show, it had a much better, stronger start. Discovery has fumbled a lot more in its first season to find its feet, but I do think it will get there eventually, where Orville had a stronger start for what it is. Now, that doesn't mean I like the Orville better. It just means because it's apples and oranges, and I don't want to fucking compare them because I'm sick of people comparing them. It's dumb. And I'm sorry, the Orville's not Star Trek. Doesn't matter how much you say it, how much you like it, how much you slap the name on it. It is a Star Trek parody. That's the fact. It is a fact I just have to live with it. But anyway, now I know. Now let me address, like, a lot of people may say, well, what do you mean it's a comedy show? Because there's a lot of serious storylines. There's a storyline about, the guy who, all male species, and they had a daughter, and they took it to the planet, and everyone wanted to have a sex change, but they were fighting to not have that. And there was this other, serious storyline about this group of people where they had the social apps, and it made commentary on social apps, so it makes commentary on real life just like Star Trek. That's why I think it's a successful comedy parody, because of the dramatic elements, because it feels like Star Trek. And that's what I mean by the showrunner Seth MacFarlane. Everyone understands Star Trek. They're able to make this great parody that pays homage to Star Trek much better. Because I was talking about, like, Black Mirror did the Star Trek episode to original series, and it's obvious that he knew, those writers knew nothing about Star Trek. But they, as I said in that video, they weren't even trying to be like Star Trek. They were just using it as a setting. The writer even said, I don't really know much about Star Trek, but for what he was doing, he didn't need to. So that was fine. But with the Orville, you can tell that these writers do know Star Trek a lot, so they're able to create this parody that really works. Now, let me get more into some of these issues that I would have if you would say, this is Star Trek and it's a drama. Why would I hate this show? Okay, for one, Seth MacFarlane, this is a big ego trip for him to be making himself the captain. I don't buy him as a captain in a serious show. And a comedy, it's fine. Also, his first officer is his ex-wife, and it has a really, like, sitcom feel to it, where you have these ex-partners, constantly bickering with each other, and their captain and first officer. Again, comedy, perfectly okay. Drama, dumb as hell. I would hate it. And then you have, look up these characters' names. Like, there's the Navigators guys. Let's see if I can find their names. Seth MacFarlane, I don't know the names, but Seth MacFarlane's buddy, who's like this really smart navigator, Lieutenant Gordon Malloy. Okay, and there's this other one. Who's the other one? John Lamar, is that the other one? Yeah. If this was a serious drama, I would hate these characters with a passion. These characters are dumb. They make stupid jokes all the time. They act like they're from 2018. Flat out. Like, and not just them. Like, a lot of times other people were like, they're watching fucking Seinfeld on the bridge, for Christ's sake. If they did this in the actual Star Trek show, I would be like, I would just flip my lid. It would be so stupid. But it's not an actual Star Trek show. It's a comedy parody, and as a comedy parody, this stuff is fine. It's perfectly fine. And then you have that sort of advanced android guy. That's Data. That is Data. If we're saying this is a serious drama, I'm like, why the fuck are you doing Data again, for Christ's sake? What's wrong with you? But that makes perfect sense for a parody, because that's what parodies do. They emulate the other, another source material, but they put a comedic spin to it, and a lot of times it's not to make fun of it, but to pay homage to it, and that's what Orville does beautifully. It does it beautifully. So, just to be clear, I know a lot of you fans of the Orville who hate Discovery probably, your heads are, smoke is coming out of your ears and your head is all red. But just to be clear, I like the Orville. I do, as I said, I think it's one of my favorite comedy shows that's currently on, and I can't wait to see what comes next. But again, even if you weren't to say it was a Star Trek show, if you just were to say this is a serious drama, I'd still have a lot of issues with it, because a lot of the storylines are a bit convoluted, a bit rehashed, and it's just sort of like generic sci-fi stuff that we've seen a whole lot of stuff before. We're trying to find this episode. There's this episode where they're on this ship that the people don't know it's a ship. It's like this huge ship, and they have this religion, and there's Liam Neeson, and apparently it was the original like creator or runner of the ship, but they forgot they were in a ship, and he turns to this godlike figure. Someone pointed out before, that is the original series episode for The World is Hollow and I Have Touched the Sky, basically. I mean, there's some alterations, some differently, but it's the same basic plot. And just a lot of these things are obvious, and as I said, that is A-okay. I mean, let's talk about the Rob Lowe's character, who's like this guy. He looks like a bully, and then he's in Heat. He's the one that's Seth MacFarlane's wife cheated on him with, and you find out that he nurses, these hormones. Okay, I will admit that does remind me of some really bad episodes of Star Trek. So you could say that's a bad episode of Star Trek, but that's not something that you would want to emulate to. But I think I actually thought it was fine for comedy. But as I said, there's a lot of drama that works in the show. As some people think, oh, this is a drama with some comedic moments. But the reason why I say this is a comedy with some dramatic moments is because the heart of the show is Seth MacFarlane, this silly character who has his ex-wife, just like a sitcom. You have the navigators who are constantly cracking dick jokes. So the whole setting is a comedy, and then a lot of other like main setting of like the admiral guy saying, "Oh, going out there." It's not the setting of a drama show; it's the setting of a comedy show. But you do have dramatic characters like the what's his name, Bortas? I don't know, that all male guy. Like, and the girl who's like really young, but she's like really strong. Like, these are really interesting dramatic characters, and there's a lot of good drama stories and action stories that come from these characters. But that doesn't mean it's not a comedy. Again, if you take that comedy genre, that crutch away from the show, then despite those I would say those good dramatic moments would not work as well as they do now. I think the good dramatic moments enhance the show as a comedy show because it's a comedy show with dramatic moments. And so I really like it in that regard. Now, let me talk. I want to talk about another thing that some people who were saying, "Oh, this is Star Trek, but Discovery isn't," were saying is that, we have Brennan Braga. He's an executive producer, and he knows a lot about Star Trek and Discovery. Who they have? Brian Fuller dropped out, so they don't have anyone who's really associated with Star Trek. Really? Is that the route you're going to go? Brennan Braga? Seriously? I mean, you might want to reconsider that. Brennan Braga, the things I just talked about earlier that ruined Star Trek, he was responsible for those. Last 3 seasons of Voyager, first 2 seasons of Enterprise, that's Brennan Braga. Now, he did write some good episodes of Next Generation and Voyager. He wasn't involved in Deep Space Nine. I had to clear that up just for anyone who got confused about that. But he did write some. He wrote like First Contact and a couple of TNG movies, including Generations. But he wrote some good episodes of Next Generation and some good episodes of Voyager. So he's a decent writer, but he's not a good showrunner. And this was proven as soon as he took over Voyager. Voyager just went downhill because it was just repeating the same thing over and over again. And same with Enterprise. He was the chief showrunner of Enterprise for the first 2 seasons. When he stepped back and stopped being as much involved in season 3, that's when Enterprise got good. So I'm starting to see a pattern here. Brennan Braga is not a good Star Trek. And honestly, like from interviews, I think he's a decent writer, but from interviews I've seen him in, he does not get Star Trek. In fact, he specifically said that Star Trek should be episodic. And I think anyone who says that should not be allowed to be involved in Star Trek in any way, shape, or form. I'm sorry. And it's true. And in fact, some people were saying, well, I like Orville because it's episodic and Discovery isn't. Star Trek's always episodic. honestly don't think you understand Star Trek if that's your feeling. I'm sorry. But, I mean, you could say the original series was like that. But I think Star Trek has evolved past the original series over 30 years ago, frankly. And you could be like, oh, well, what about Next Generation? Next Generation was episodic at the time because it needed to be, but it has elements of serialization and continuity. In fact, that's what makes Next Generation so good. You had the storyline with Jean-Luc Picard being captured by the Borg, and that's touched on again like several times throughout the series. You have this character Q, and he has a continuous storyline. He appears. He's not erased. They don't just forget every time he's on. Next time he comes on, they're like, oh, what he did the last time has consequences. Same with like Barclay, the Traveler. There's lots of through storylines through the Next Generation that do have a sense of continuity, of serialization, that because of the nature of television at the time, they couldn't get away with string continuity, which is commonplace in television nowadays. But they did get away with what they could, and these elements made Next Generation so much better. And then there's Deep Space Nine, which flat out did become serialized in its last 2 seasons, which many consider like Deep Space Nine as a pioneer that's paved the path for a lot of these shows, modern serialized shows we have now. And they say, and a lot of people who love Deep Space Nine think it's the best Star Trek show, which I include myself. And there is a large camp, even though it's not the majority. There's a lot of people who think Deep Space Nine is the best Star Trek show, and it is because of the consistency, the character growth, and you can't have this strong character growth without a sense of serialization, without a sense of continuity, and that's what made the show so good. Voyager is a prime example of how episodic storytelling can ruin a show. Voyager would have been way better, and I talk about this a lot, if they embraced continuity, if they embraced serialization. But because you had Brenna freaking Brega come in and say no. In fact, there's a story of him with Ronald D. Moore, showrunner of Deep Space Nine. Well, not showrunner, he was executive producer. Aaron Seaver Bear was the showrunner of Deep Space Nine, but he was like a high up head writer sort of guy. Not head writer, but he was a high up, Ronald D. Moore. He was good friends with Brennan Brega, and he went in after Deep Space Nine finished. He went to Voyager, and he had all these great ideas to shake Voyager up, to have these lasting, continuous storylines, to change Voyager, take it in new directions, and Brennan Brega shot him down every time, and so he quit after 2 episodes. And in fact, it's said that these guys worked together in Next Generation. They wrote First Contact together, so they were good friends. And it said that this almost ruined their friendship. He almost stopped talking to him because of the way he was so resistant to doing anything with Voyager, because he was so insistent that Voyager just be episodic, that it forget everything, that it wipe the storyline clean every single time and just pretend the last episode didn't happen. And that is bad for Star Trek. That is bad storytelling. And ironically, Enterprise, even those first 2 seasons that Brega was involved with, that had more continuity. And especially you get into the 3rd season, which is one continuous storyline through the entire season. And many consider that the best, if not the best, the second best season of Enterprise. I personally think it's the best. I know that some people love to hate on it, but I'm sorry, you're in the minority. Most people love season 3 of Enterprise. And then you got season 4, which had a lot of 3-parters. A lot of 2 and 3 parts. So again, it's playing with string continuity, with things being continuous and serialized, and that's when the show was good. So this attitude that Star Trek needs to be episodic is destroying Star Trek. That is frankly what destroyed Voyager and its first 2 seasons of Enterprise, and that's the attitude Brennan Brega had. So I wouldn't be so quick to champion him as disproving that this is a Star Trek show. Yeah. It's just not the way to go. But, I mean, to be fair to the Orville, I was more ranting about Braga than I was about the Orville. But getting back to the Orville, and to be fair to the Orville, it does have a sense of continuity as well, just like Next Generation does. There are some through storylines, such as the wife and, the ex-wife, whatever, that develops. You get character development between them throughout the season, even though it's an episodic nature. So that's fine, but as I said, that whole storyline in the first place is a sitcom storyline. It doesn't belong in the Star Trek show, so it's fine if you say it's a parody, comedy parody. But so I don't mind that. To be clear, I don't mind that Brendan Berg is involved with the overall. I think that's fine, but I'm against people who say, "Whoa," point to him and say that means this is Star Trek and Discovery isn't. You're dead wrong. You are so wrong that I can't even begin to get into it, and that's really the wrong person to champion who knew Star Trek, because he doesn't really. And frankly, I'm glad that people like him, and more importantly, Rick Berman, which I haven't gotten into a lot, are not involved in Star Trek anymore. That's exactly what Star Trek needs to do. It needs to kick out people like them who are stuck in the past and just want to regurgitate old storylines over and over again, and get in fresh new blood who will take Star Trek in new directions like Discovery's doing. Now, again, I'm not saying Discovery is better than Orville. I refuse to compare the two, and say, well, I have to compare for this because everyone else is, and I have to comment on that. But I am not going to say which one is better, because I think that could not possibly be more irrelevant. Okay, so I think I got that out of my system, and that's pretty much most of what I had to say. I mean, I can get into some individual episodes. Oh, there's another thing I want to talk about. Okay, different subject. This is this episode of Orville, where there's this planet that there's like a social rating, and then you have there's no lawyers, there's no legal system. It's all done through publicity, and so people would rate on, and people have this number of their popularity rating, and they do something that's seen as unpopular, like they piss on a statue, or try to pretend to have sex with the statue like this navigator does, then he's seen as a bad person, and so he gets a bad social rating score. And if you get a really bad score, then you're basically lobotomized and turn into this weird zombie thing. So you have to go on an apology tour. He said you have to go there's no legal system, it's just the apology tour. You go on talk shows and you'd be like, I'm sorry. And so this is really poignant social commentary, especially this was before all the scandalous things that destroyed everyone's career. Some of them, don't get me wrong, there's some of them, like Harvey Weinstein and Kevin Spacey, absolutely deserve to be destroyed. But it's the whole attitude of trying people in the court of public opinion instead of the actual court. So this episode took it to a whole new level where there is no actual court. The whole thing is court of public opinion, and it makes some really strong commentary on this, and it reflects on our real life society. And so, this is a really good episode, but I liked it better the first time I saw it when it was on Black Mirror. Because this is basically, some people say, oh, it's Black Mirror-esque. It's not Black Mirror-esque. It is Black Mirror. It is just regurgitating two different episodes from Black Mirror and throwing them together and putting it in the context of Orville. And this is what Orville does. It just regurgitates storylines from, even if it's not Star Trek, even if it's a Black Mirror. So there's an episode of Black Mirror where someone had everyone's had their social rating. They go around and rate people. And if you have a low rating, you can't get coffee, which is the exact same thing that happens in this episode. And you can't get, service or whatever. Your rating goes down. But there's also an episode of Black Mirror where people were being tried in the court of public opinion called Hated in the Nation, where this hashtag saying who deserves to die, and everyone puts that hashtag, and then that person would be killed, which is also kind of what happens here, because people vote to have these people lobotomized. So it's basically taking these two episodes of Black Mirror and regurgitating them. Which, again, I think is a bit more excusable for a comedy show to do this, because, and I do think it's poignant commentary, but it's obviously not as good as the Black Mirror episodes. Now, and one thing I want to comment, which I think is really weird, and I wonder if they did this on purpose, is that not Malloy, who's the other dude? I can find his name. Is it John Lamar? Is that the guy? Hold on. Yeah, John Lamar. So, this storyline, he's a navigator for all of season 1, but at the end of season 1, they promote him to chief engineer. Are they trying to just copy Geordi LaForge from season? Because Geordi LaForge in Next Generation season 1 was the navigator for season 1, but then he was chief engineer for the rest of the show. Or did they just do that on purpose to copy it, or did they come to the same conclusion that actually we don't have it? They had this one chief engineer guy, but he was like a factory worker, and like he was a bit annoying. I didn't really like him, and he didn't appear all that much. So they got rid of him, and they made a main character, because he wasn't a main character. They made John Lamar, who is a main character, the chief engineer. So, was that purpose commentary on Next Generation, or did they make the same mistake as Next Generation did, say, oh, we don't need a chief engineer, and find out that they did, so they had to take maybe they're just like, oh, let's do the... Either way, I just think, really? You're going to do LaForge all over again? I mean, come on. Even for a parody show, that's pushing my patience. I'm sorry, but it is. That was kind of dumb. Okay, and then you get the finale, which apparently wasn't originally meant to be a finale. They pushed the finale back to the premiere, I think, is what I heard, if I remember correctly. But the finale of the episode of... Oh, fucking lost my spot. But it was about, like... kind of ripping off the Voyager episode Blink in Time, but Blink of an Eye, where but people say that episode's ripping off a book, but I think it's different enough from the book where it's not ripping it off, whereas this comes off as a bit too similar to the Voyager episode. And even like people say it's ripping off an original series episode, but I think the Voyager episode was different enough, and this Orville episode is closer to the Voyager episode than it is the original series episode. It's almost exactly like the Voyager episode. Again, no originality to the show, but for a comedy parody show, it's fine, because parodies don't need to have originality, because that's the whole point of a parody, is to be like something else and parody it. But anyway, so the time moves really fast on this thing, and it does take a different turn than the Voyager episode, but it's very similar. But the first officer becomes like this god figure. See, that episode in itself, like, it was interesting. I love, this is my favorite episodes of, The Simpsons or Futurama, is when they do these interesting sci-fi stuff. So I love to see comedy shows that do these weird sci-fi things. But if I were to think of it as drama, I would say, I don't buy it. I don't buy that episode. I don't buy those things can happen. And even as the show itself, I was kind of like, eh. And then it had this boring episode where the doctor or whatever was trapped on the planet with and her kids were with the android. That was like this cliche. That's the Star Trek cliche of shuttlecraft crashing and the people get caught and they have to learn to get together. That episode was boring. But also, I do have to mention one thing I love about the Orville, which I think is great, is Norm Macdonald's character, the blob of green. He's hilarious. I love Norm Macdonald. I love that he got in the voice of him. And I love that he wasn't originally meant to be a main character, but that he just started appearing more and more and more because he worked for the show. And that's what shows that do stuff like that. They catch on to what's working, and so they focus on that more. That's good writing. So I love that they focused on him more, so I think that's great. Now, as much as I say that Andrew is a ripoff of Data, I do think he's really interesting. He's not... Exactly, Data, because he's from an advanced, race that kind of looked down on other species. Oh, and then you had the zoo episode, which is people are saying is just the regurgitation of the cage in the menagerie of the original series. But again, you got a different spin of it. I actually saw an episode of the Buzz Lightyear cartoon that was exactly like this Orville episode where those people were in the zoo. But anyway, again, it's fine for comedies to do this. So my rating out of 10 for the Orville is a 9. What? I thought Mark, you've been trashing the Orville all the time and saying how it sucks. No, I haven't. Listen to me. I'm not saying the Orville sucks. I'm saying it would suck if I look at it as a drama, just like Ace Ventura, which is one of my favorite movies of all time, would suck if I looked at it as a drama, but I don't. I look at it as a comedy because that's what it is. And as a comedy, I give it a 9 out of 10. Excellent, great parody. I mean, 9 out of 10 because some of these jokes are dumb, let's be frank. And some of these episode plots, I think, do fail a bit. But for the most part, it's a beautiful homage to Star Trek. It does have the same... it does make powerful commentary on society, just like Star Trek does, and that's makes it an even better homage, a better parody show. And it's funny at times, and it's interesting to watch too. So that makes it a good show. Yeah, so 9 out of 10. Anyway, as I said, that's just my thoughts off the top of the head of the Orville. I might come back later in the year, next year, whenever season 2 starts, to do more detailed, in-depth review of the Orville, and I won't tread the ground that I tread here already about the comedy drama thing, and just talk about the show as is. But as for now, I just wanted to get this out here real quick. So thank you so much for watching. You can check out my channel as I cover actual Star Trek shows, and be sure to check me out for that. Thanks a lot for watching.